They said he didn't belong. They said he was a draft pick with a famous last name and nothing else. They said the Cleveland Browns made a mistake. And then Shedeur Sanders walked onto that practice field, and he hasn't stopped since.
Get right into things, man. Shedeur Sanders absolutely spinning it at OTAs. Check out this dot, man. This was a dime to Tylen Wallace for a touchdown. We'll run that back. Absolute dime. That is an absolute dot. That's a dime from Shedeur Sanders right there. It's a good route, snapped it off.
Let's be real for a second. When Shedeur Sanders got drafted by the Cleveland Browns, the conversation wasn't about promise or potential. It wasn't about what this kid could become. The conversation was about whether he even deserved to be there. The noise was deafening. The doubt was everywhere. Even some of the biggest names in Cleveland sports media, people who follow this team every single day, weren't buying it. There was an entire movement, a loud, organized, vocal movement, folks who had made up their minds before Shedeur threw a single pass in an NFL setting, before he stepped into a single team meeting, before he even put on that Browns jersey for the first time. They called themselves the Anybody But Shedeur crowd, and for a while, they were winning the narrative. But something happened at OTAs that nobody was prepared for.
It's supposed to have been borderline flawless in the practice. I'm hearing it's Sanders by a whole bunch, and now you know why his offensive center is raving about him. His OC is raving about him. Take a look at this. Absolute dime, man. Shedeur Sanders throwing ropes, putting on a show, man. He's making his claim to be QB1.
Shedeur Sanders showed up. Not just physically, not just going through the motions, punching the clock, doing what rookies do to survive the spring. He showed up. Dimes flying, ropes cutting through coverage, touchdowns dropping right into hands like it was nothing, like the pressure didn't exist, like the noise outside that facility meant absolutely zero to him. The first one people couldn't stop talking about, a perfect strike to Tylen Wallace. Not a lob, not a lucky bounce, a dot. A perfectly placed ball that landed exactly where only his receiver could get it. Clean release, beautiful trajectory, and Wallace, who we have to give credit to because drops have been a real issue for this receiving core, he caught it, hailed it in clean for the touchdown. People replayed that throw over and over again because it didn't look like a rookie finding his footing. It looked like a quarterback staking his claim. And that was just the beginning, because then came the frozen rope to Denzel Boston. If the Wallace touchdown was the opening statement, the throw to Boston was the closing argument. Reports started coming out of that practice that Shedeur was, and I'm not paraphrasing here, borderline flawless. His offensive coordinator couldn't stop raving. Guys inside that building who weren't supposed to be talking were talking. The word leaking out wasn't impressive for a rookie. The word was dominant. Shedeur by a whole bunch. That's what they were saying. And here's the part that really shook things up. Even members of the Anybody But Shedeur camp started to crack. Voices who had been loudly skeptical, who had been publicly dismissive, they started to acknowledge something was happening out there in Cleveland they couldn't ignore anymore. When your harshest critics start changing their tune, that's not a practice highlight. That's a shift.
Alex, we played your audio on this. Like, you have recognized that, sure, fine. Deshaun Watson looks like he is regaining that athleticism and looks like he's had some zip on the ball. But you've also said what we've said, which is it's May. There's no pass rush. So we're just pointing all that out. I don't think there's anything wrong with stating that. And because of that, maybe Watson does have the edge now, but also who knows what it's going to look like in September when teams are trying to crush him.
But here's where it gets complicated. And this is the part of the story that most people aren't telling you. Because there's another quarterback in this race, a name that carries its own weight, its own history, its own complicated, painful, controversial story, Deshaun Watson. Watson was once one of the most electrifying quarterbacks in the NFL, a guy who could extend plays, make throws that defied physics, and carry a team on his back. That version of Deshaun Watson was real. That version was special. But that version has been gone for a long time. Multiple injuries, a lengthy suspension, missing an entire season, and not just any injury in his return, a ruptured Achilles, then the same Achilles again. That's the kind of damage that doesn't just heal on a training schedule. That's the kind of damage that changes how a quarterback moves for the rest of his career. And yet, here in the spring, Watson looks healthy. Watson is throwing with zip. The footwork looks clean. By all accounts, he's competing. Head coach Todd Monken hasn't put his finger on the scale. Both quarterbacks are getting equal reps. This isn't last year's situation where the depth chart felt predetermined before the pads ever came on. This is a real competition, a legitimate fight for the starting job. And so, the question everyone in Cleveland keeps asking is, what does experience buy you? Here's the honest answer that the smart voices around this team are giving you. Experience matters. Deshaun Watson has started NFL games. He's operated under live pass rush pressure, in hostile environments, in fourth-quarter situations where everything is on the line. Shedeur Sanders has never done that at this level. And in a vacuum, that matters. But, and this is a massive but, every single time Deshaun Watson has come back from a long layoff, he has struggled. That's not an opinion, that's a pattern. After the suspension, struggle. After the shoulder injury, struggle. And now we're asking him to come back after missing an entire year with a catastrophic Achilles injury that he suffered twice. Spring OTAs? No pass rush, no live defenders, no September crowd screaming while a 280-pound defensive end is coming off the edge to end your season. What Deshaun Watson does in that environment tells us something, but it doesn't tell us everything. Not even close.
Here's the thing to remember about Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur is a gamer. Shedeur plays on natural instincts. When the lights are on and it's time for him to march downfield in a 2-minute situation, he gets in a zone and he lets his natural instincts take over. And that's why you saw him be able to perform pretty well in some clutch situations last year, despite the fact that he had never thrown to most of these players and the fact that he didn't have much.
And this is where Shedeur Sanders becomes the most fascinating story in the entire NFL this offseason. Because here's what the people who know him best keep saying, the thing that doesn't always show up in practice highlights or OTA reports or media narratives. Shedeur Sanders is a gamer. He doesn't operate on surface-level metrics. He doesn't thrive in the controlled, vanilla environment of spring practices, where it's all about looking polished and protecting the ball. That's not where his fire ignites. His fire ignites when the lights come on, when the clock is running down, when the team needs a drive, when everyone in the building knows what's at stake and there's nowhere to hide. That's when Shedeur Sanders gets into his zone that's almost impossible to explain from the outside. We've already seen flashes of it, even last year, operating without chemistry with his receivers, behind a patchwork offensive line that was held together with tape and prayers. He delivered in clutch moments. He made plays that rookies with far more support couldn't make. And now, he's got an entire offseason to build connections, real reps, real rhythm with real weapons. The preseason games are coming, the joint practices against the Buffalo Bills are coming, and that's when Shedeur Sanders is going to flip a switch that a lot of people in the NFL world are not ready for. The reality in Cleveland right now is this. The coaching staff will likely set a depth chart coming out of minicamp. Watson may be on top of it initially, and the anybody but Shedeur crowd will exhale for a moment. They'll think the battle is won. But a depth chart in May is not a Week 1 starter in September, and a Week 1 starter in September is not necessarily the man taking snaps in Week 37 when the season is on the line. The people who understand this team, the people who watch every rep, every throw, every sideline reaction, they're not declaring this thing decided, because it isn't, not even close. There is genuine belief inside that building that Shedeur Sanders will start NFL games for the Cleveland Browns this season, not because Watson fails, not because of some injury or controversy or front office drama, but because when real football starts, when it's real defenders and real pressure and real stakes, Shedeur Sanders is the kind of player who makes every argument against him evaporate. The anybody but Shedeur movement is getting very, very quiet, and the Cleveland Browns are about to find out exactly what they have in this young quarterback. The summer is just beginning, the preseason hasn't started, and Shedeur Sanders is already dropping dimes. Imagine what happens when the real games begin. This story isn't over, it's barely started, and if you want to be there for every chapter, every throw, every twist, every moment this race heats up, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the bell notifications so you never miss a single update, because what's coming in Cleveland this summer, you do not want to watch it from the outside. We're just getting started.